Okay, so this is going to be a video talking about the Sidehop setup for pause storage. Let me give you a demo. There you go. I'm going to show you two ways to do it, but before I do that, I want to kind of talk about where and how this trick works. If you don't care about that, you can of course use the timestamps to skip to just the execution part, but I want to talk about what loading zones this works for and the mechanics we're taking advantage of and how that compares to some old methods. So, the loading zones this works for fit two criteria. They need to be flat and they need to be grounded loading zones. Flat in this context, because we're doing a side hop, just means that the position that I start at and the position that I end at have the same height. That's like the technical definition, but of course you know what flat means. This ground looks pretty flat. This loading zone looks pretty flat. And indeed, in this game, most of the places that look flat are flat. There are some exceptions. The entrance to the Ganon fight, for whatever reason, this doesn't work, and we assume it's because it's just barely not flat, even though it looks like it. And then you have some more obvious ones, you know, something like leaving the Master Sword room. There's stairs that go up out of that loading zone. That's a slope. Obviously, that won't work. But most cases that look flat like this will work. So that's the first thing. The second thing is it needs to be a grounded loading zone. Which in particular means that it won't activate if Link is airborne. So to give you an idea of what I'm talking about, you can kind of see this line on the ground where the texture changes. That's where the loading zone starts for this little entrance. If this was not a grounded loading zone, then it would just activate as soon as I cross that line when I side hop in. But because it is grounded, it's actually not going to trigger until my feet hit the ground. Just like that. So those are the only two conditions. That's all it needs. If it's both of those things, then it'll work. Notably, this is not a position-dependent setup. As long as you start your side hop outside the loading zone and end up inside the loading zone, it doesn't matter where you start it from, doesn't matter what angle you do it from, and this is different than what we did before. You know, you might do something like this, where you get yourself in the perfect position and use the little step forward from the quick spin to touch the loading zone right as the options menu comes up. We're not using position for this. We're actually just taking advantage, like I said, of the fact that the loading zone won't activate until we touch the ground. And we combine that with just an insane stroke of luck for this trick. Turns out the amount of time it takes to do a side hop from when I leave the ground to when I land is exactly the same as the amount of time it takes from when I let go of the options button here to when the menu pops up. So if we can let go of the button at the same time that we start the side hop, then I will land at the same time that the options menu comes up. And so we can kind of deduce logically here that if the loading zone doesn't trigger until I land, and the options menu comes up at the same time that I land, then the options menu and the loading zone will happen at the same time, which is the conditions for pause storage, and so it just works. And in no part of that do we need to be in a specific position, we just need to side hop into the loading zone. So that's why this works. I'm going to show you two ways to do it. The first way I'm going to show you is the way that I originally did it. I don't really recommend this way, but I do like it a little bit because notably on this one we're going to be pressing the home button on the gamepad instead of on the Pro Controller. The Pro Controller's home button is kind of like recessed into the controller, and it's kind of a mushy button, so it's a little harder. It doesn't have as much feedback. It's a little harder to make sure you're pressing it when you actually try to press it. Whereas this one's nice and clicky, and you know when you press it. I think it's a little easier to time it using this one. But with practice, they should be about the same. And the second grip I'm going to show you is more like a normal grip. It's the one I did in the beginning of the video, and it uses the home button on the Pro Controller. So I'm going to show you both just so you can work with whichever one you want. Worth noting, though, you should probably do the second one just because, like I mentioned, the grip is more similar to normal, so it's going to take less time to transition into it. But anyway, we'll get there when we get there. Here's the first one. For this one, I'm going to have one hand on each controller. I'm going to use my right hand for the Pro Controller, and we need to have access to the A button, ZL, and the stick. So the way I do that is I put my thumb on the A button, and I kind of wrap my hand around so my middle finger is on ZL, and then my index finger can reach the stick, just like this. And this looks pretty terrible. I mean, it looks pretty awkward, and if you have small hands, it will certainly be, you know, it'll feel pretty awkward. But you don't need like super fine control over the index, or yeah, over the stick using your index finger. It just needs to hold in one direction. So, you know, if you can get it to work, then that's fine. And then for the left hand, you don't need to do much. You just need to hold the options button and press the home button. It doesn't really matter what you hold options with. I would recommend using your thumb for the home button though. So before we actually do it, there's something I want to talk about with side hops. If we're timing a side hop, one way we could do it is by pressing all of the buttons at the same time, like this. And this works, but it kind of, especially with one hand like this, it's just really hard to get all of the buttons on the same frame. So to kind of increase our margin of error here, what we're going to do is hold target and hold the stick, and then we're just going to time the A press for this trick. Let's get back over there. We have our side to the loading zone, I guess. I'm like perpendicular to it in the middle. You could, you know, this would work as well, just so long as you land in it. It doesn't really matter where you're standing. I'm going to hold ZL. I'm going to hold the options button, and you'll know if you're holding it because it'll get a little bit bigger. I can't show it on the camera here. But really look at that, because it's really easy to like slide off of the button when you're not paying attention, and then nothing will come up after the home buffer. So make sure you're holding it going in. And then I'm just going to walk a little bit preemptively when I'm ready, and then press home and A on the same frame. You do want to press home a little bit before A. They do need to be on the same frame, but try to press home first, and just press them really quickly in succession. I'll explain why later, but that's kind of what you want to do. Let's see if I can get it. And woo, I got it. It's really not that hard with a bit of practice, if I'm honest. It seems a little daunting to time them together. Oh, it's frame perfect, but it's really not bad. And then the second method, like I said, it's very similar to how you would normally play, but we need to adjust our right hand a little bit because we need to press home on this controller. So I'm going to kind of slide my index finger up and have my thumb on A still. And then because we don't need to press home on the gamepad anymore, we're doing it on the Pro Controller, we just need to press the options. And so we need access to target and the stick for the side hop. So that leaves these three fingers. You can use any of them, just reach down and hold options. I recommend the middle finger. You could use your pinky as well. Probably don't use your ring finger. It's pretty uncomfortable to do that. And with this one especially, you want to make sure you're holding the button. It's really easy to slide off without realizing on this one. And then it works the same. So there we go. Important also, let go of everything. So once you've entered the home menu, let go of everything and then close the home menu. You don't need to hold anything after. So that's it. That's how you do it. I am going to talk about a little bit more, though. Going to clarify some stuff. You know, I mentioned earlier that you kind of just need to time the release of the options menu and the A button for the side hop at the same time. And so some of you might be thinking, well, why don't we just let go of the options button and press A at the same time? Why do we need the home buffer? Isn't the timing the same? And it is the same, you're right. And it's a little bit faster because you don't have to change your grip as much and you don't have to go to the home menu, obviously. And in fact, this is pretty easy to do. I get it more times than I fail it when I'm messing around with it. But there is still a reason to home buffer, because honestly, the home buffer isn't really for the timing. It's more of a safety net. And this is also the same reason why we press home a little bit before A. To demonstrate, I'm going to compare the ways that you can fail it with unbuffered and with buffered. So with unbuffered, or well, with both of them, there's two ways to fail it. So I'm going to be referring to the A press. So if you press the A button too early, in this case, press A before letting go of options, this happens. The options menu doesn't have enough time to come up, so you hit the loading zone and you go in normally. And so that fails by going into the loading zone without the options coming up. If you let go of options too early, or in other words, if you press A too late, I'm trying to think how to do this, like this, then the options menu will come up. And if I close this, I'm not going to have enough time to open it again. But I'm already airborne, I'm in the loading zone, so I'm going to hit the loading zone, and that's not going to work. So notably, both ways that I can fail that hit the loading zone. And for something like the Helm Rock cutscene or Puppy Ganon cutscene, anything long like that where you're jumping straight into the loading zone for the cutscene, that's just run dead. Instantly you hit the loading zone. It's kind of redeemable for things like Digger Tree Cutscene Skip, because you can just walk out and then try it again. But in most cases, this is like the worst case scenario, is you hit the loading zone without getting pause storage. So when you buffer it, when you home buffer it, the first case is the same. If I press A too early, oops, I forgot to home buffer, oops. If you press A too early, which you'll be able to see in the freeze frame, there you go, the same thing is going to happen, right? The options menu isn't going to have enough time to come up, and I'm already airborne, so I'm going to hit the loading zone. There's nothing I can do about it. You actually can't even pull leaf, because we're home buffering with the Pro Controller. You can't input anything for a little bit after you release, so no way to save that, really. So that's the same as unbuffered, but watch what happens if I press A too late, or press home too early. I stop moving, and then the options menu comes up. And it's important that I stop moving, because now, not only am I not in the loading zone, which is like pretty nice, but I'm also in a perfect position to just try it again, right? So if I failed it like that, I can just try it again. And oh darn, I failed it. So I close the menu and I try it again. And hey, I got it. Like, that reason right there, that way of failing it, is the whole point of home buffering. Because what you can do, like I said, you can just press home slightly before A, and now you've limited the possibilities. If you're actually pressing home before A, there's only two things that can happen. You press them quick enough in succession to where it'll work, or you fail it that way that I showed you, and you lose, what, like a second and a half to... or no, I guess it's a little bit more because you have to try it again. You lose some time, a small amount of time. Whereas with unbuffered, both versions of failure will result in you jumping into the loading zone and probably losing a lot of time. So that's why we home buffer, for the safety. I've been saying this is like not very hard to pull off, and it's not really, but you want, you know, you're going to fail it sometimes. So that safeguard is really important, especially for ones like Puppet Ganon Cutscene Skip. The amount of room you have to do the side hop isn't as much, so you don't have a lot of time to do this. It's really easy to mistime that one. So just as long as you're keeping that bias in mind, you're not going to just lose your run to failing it. So that's the difference. That's why I recommend buffering. That's the side hop setup. Yeah, hopefully you found that useful. That's it. Thanks for watching.